Hello friends, welcome back to yet another Facebook live session brought to you by the team here at BYJU'S. Now these sessions have been called Revise with BYJU'S sessions. Now the exam seasons are fast approaching, so our team here thought that we might as well give you insights into how well can you prepare for the upcoming board examinations. Now the board examinations are less than 2 weeks away, and today's session, which focuses on mathematics, has its exam in the last 10 days of March. So you almost have another three and a half weeks before your mathematics exam. We've had 2 sessions in math before this one, and in those 2 sessions, we've discussed the whole of Math Book 1 and we've also discussed integration. Today's session focuses on the next 3 chapters. We've seen integration in the previous session. Today I'll give you insights on applications of integration, which is a chapter which deals with area under curves. Then I'll give you insights on differential equations. Now, differential equation is a chapter which involves both differentiation and integration. More on integration and less on differentiation. But it can be said that this chapter is an application of both differentiation and integration. So after applications of integration and differential equations, we will look at vector algebra. Now, vector algebra is not a new thing to you because you've seen vector algebra already in physics. But in mathematics, vector algebra is introduced only in the later half of 12th standard because vector algebra forms the foundation of three-dimensional geometry, which is the chapter that will follow. Three-dimensional geometry, linear programming and probability will be dealt with in the next session, which is in about 3 or 4 days' time. So today's session focuses on applications of integrals, differential equations and vector algebra. So the questions that I will be answering at the end of today's session, I hope will be from these 3 chapters. Also, you can ask questions from book 1 and integration because I've already covered these chapters in the previous sessions. So any questions from these chapters will also be welcome. Now, if you ask questions from three-dimensional geometry, linear programming or probability, you'll have to wait until the next session to get the answers for these things. Yet another thing that you must remember when you're posting questions is that please do not ask numericals because it's a 20-30 minute long session. I will not have time to solve numericals in this particular session. For any such queries regarding numericals, you can write to us and the team here at BYJU'S will definitely answer your queries. A lot of numericals have been solved in our app, so you can actually download and subscribe to our app in case you've not done that. It's still not late. You have another 3 weeks before the examination, so you can subscribe to our app. The details for downloading the app can be found in the description to this video. You can download the BYJU'S material and prepare well for the examination because a lot of wonderful questions, really nice questions have been solved in our app and you can make best use of this. So without wasting much time, let's get into application of integrals. Now this is the 8th chapter of mathematics. Application of integration is nothing but area under curve. So this entire chapter deals with area under curve. Now the beauty of this chapter from the examination point of view is only one question comes from this chapter and the question which comes is a 6-mark question. Now again, you cannot expect a lot of complicated problems from this particular chapter, but if you do not know integration, solving problems from this chapter will become slightly tricky. Now the most important thing that you must remember when you're solving problems from application of integration is to make use of graphs. So as soon as you see a problem, the best principle that you must adopt is to draw the graph of whichever curve is given to you. Now, if they say that you have to find the area enclosed between the parabola y square is equal to 4x and some straight line, let's say y is equal to x, it's the best practice to draw the parabola and the straight line. Once you draw the parabola and the straight line, you can actually see what is the area between these 2 curves. Then you have to actually find the point of intersection of these 2 curves, and as soon as you compute the point of intersection of these 2 curves, you can visually see if what you've computed makes sense or not. So the best practice in this particular chapter is to always draw plots. Now even those students who are not good with integration, who have left the whole of integration because integration is not my cup of tea, say a few people, even those students can get 2 or 3 marks from this question on application of integration without doing any integration at all. You draw the plot of the curves, you shade the area that you have to find out, you find the points of intersection. Now, none of these require any knowledge of integration because this is pure coordinate geometry, and if you understand coordinate geometry even a little, you should be able to do this very easily. So even those students who do not want to attempt integration problems will be able to score at least 40 to 50% of the marks that are there for this particular problem without any knowledge of integration. And that is what makes this problem really wonderful. So you will get 2 or 3 marks for sure if you draw a nice curve, and also if you shade the area that you have to find out and find the points of intersection. After this comes the integration. After this, you have to convert the equation you have to convert it into an explicit expression in terms of y or x and integrate with respect to x or y. So in this particular case, you will need knowledge of integration. Now, one more thing that I have seen that students commit mistake in this particular problem. Those students who know integration commit the mistake, which is computing area from the graph without using integration. You have to remember, this is an application of integration problem. Even if you have to find the area under a mod of x curve, which is nothing but a triangle, please do not use half into base into height as the formula and compute the area. This is not going to fetch you any marks because the one who is going to evaluate your paper is going to look at integration. So you will have to show your knowledge of integration to integrate and find the area under the curve. So even if these curves are straight-sided curves, or if it's a circle whose area you know, please do not compute the area of these using standard geometry or mensuration ideas. Please use the ideas of integration to get the answer to this particular problem, because if you don't do that, you're going to lose all your marks. You might get the right answer, but without integration, you will not get marks for this particular question. Just one question comes from this particular chapter on application of integration, and this question is rather very simple question, one of the easiest 6-mark question. If you know a little bit of integration, you don't need to know complicated integration to solve this problem. You don't have to know definite properties of definite integration, integration by partial fractions, or to a great extent integration by substitution also. You just need to know simple integration. Some of the formulae that you must remember is, what are the formula for integral of under root of a square minus x square? These are special formulae, and these will come more often than not because you know that a circle is x square plus y square is equal to r square, and if you write it explicitly in terms of y, it is y is equal to under root of r square minus x square, which is nothing but a form of the special integral under root of a square minus x square. So you should remember this formula very well because circle problems are asked very often. So you must remember all the under root integral formula to solve these problems very well. That's more or less it about area under a curve. Remember to draw the graph, find the point of intersection. You're going to get 2 or 3 marks for this, and then solve using integration. These are the key points that you must remember when you are solving application of integral problems. Now let's move on to the biggest chapter that I will be discussing in today's session, which is differential equations. Now, differential equation is a chapter that scares a lot of my students, and the scare is not unjustified. The scare is really justified because questions from differential equations are really tricky. The concepts of differential equation are also tricky. So differential equations is a chapter that you must focus on only if you have a very sound understanding of differentiation and integration. If you are a student who is aiming to score 40-50 marks, I will advise you not to go in detail at this particular point of time the concepts of differential equation if you don't know integration. Because without knowing integration, trying to grasp the different methods of differential equations are going to be really difficult. So it's not the right time to invest a lot of time in the chapter on differential equation if you've never done that before. Also, differential equations will fetch at max 2 questions, probably 2 4-mark questions, or 1 2-mark and 1 4-mark question. That's it. You won't get more than that from differential equation. I understand 8 marks from a chapter is quite a lot of marks, but agreed, if you've not done this chapter now, I'm not going to compel you to do this chapter. But for those students who know integration well, who know differential equations well, I can tell you what are the trends that the ones who studied the question paper follow from this particular chapter. For that, let's try and figure out what are the concepts that are there in this chapter. So I am going to break this chapter into 5 different parts. The first part is order and degree of a differential equation. Now, order and degree of a differential equation can at max fetch a 2-mark question. It will never fetch a 4-mark or a 6-mark question. In fact, from the chapter on differential equation, you do not get any 6-mark questions. You get either 2 or 4-mark questions. So order and degree will sometimes fetch a 2-mark question, but the frequency at which this problem is asked is very low. Examiners generally not tend to ask a question from order and degree. Now, order and degree is a favorite topic of competitive exam question paper setters, but not board exam question paper setters. So order and degree is a concept that you must know. Students who are expecting to score 100 marks should definitely know each and every concept that is there in the textbook. So you cannot forget this particular concepts, because out of the blue, if the examiner asks a question on order and degree, you must be able to solve it. So again, order and degree, not so important. But the second topic is very important. Now, the second topic is forming the differential equation for a family of curves. Now, what makes this topic a little bit more interesting is that in order to solve problems from this particular topic, you actually need to know a lot of concepts of conic sections and circles, which you learned in 11th standard. Now, they might ask you a family of concentric circles which have a radius at this particular point, form the differential equation for this particular one. They might ask you to find the differential equation for a family of parabolas which have the vertex at the origin and the focus along the y-axis. Now, if you don't know how to represent this, then you will not be able to score marks for this particular question. So it is important that you know your conics basics as well if you have to score marks from this particular concept, which is forming differential equation for a family of curves. An important concept, more often than not, the 2-mark question which comes from differential equation normally comes from this particular concept. Then we have solving differential equations, and we have 3 different methods in which we solve differential equations in the 12th standard syllabus. We have variable separable form, we have homogeneous form, and we have the linear form. Now, these are all related to first order differential equations, the variable separable one being the most simple one, and also a concept which is used in the final stages of both homogeneous as well as linear. In fact, in linear it is not used explicitly, but in homogeneous it is used. So variable separable is something that you must definitely know, and if the problem directly comes from variable separable, you are lucky. This year, if the problem comes from variable separable, you are a lucky bunch of students, because solving variable separable problems are easier than solving homogeneous problems. Because in homogeneous problem, there is one more small trick which sometimes students forget and tend to lose 1 out of the 4 marks that will be awarded for solving the problem correctly. And this is checking if a differential equation is a homogeneous equation. Now, as soon as you see a homogeneous equation, you know this is a homogeneous equation. You have to follow the methods of homogeneous equation, which is use a new variable and all these things. But you forget to check whether the differential equation is a homogeneous equation, and not checking this sometimes might lead to losing a mark. The one who's evaluating your paper might penalize you for not checking that whether a differential equation is homogeneous or not before proceeding with the solution. So this is one of the steps that you must remember. Always remember that you are writing board examination and not competitive examination, and hence you have to write the steps neat and clear, because there are marks for steps. The final answer is important, but it is not what fetches you 4 marks. 4 marks are for all the steps. So when you get a homogeneous differential equation, you first show that the differential equation is a homogeneous one, then use the new variable, change the differential equation in terms of v, and then proceed using variable separable, and finally reach the solution, and then substitute back the new variable in terms of x and y. So this is how you have to solve a homogeneous differential equation problem in order to get complete marks for the question. The final concept here is linear differential equation. Now, linear differential equation can fetch 2 types of problems. A problem which is 2 marks. Now, the 2-mark problem will be just to find the integration factor. Now, if you find the integration factor of a differential equation, you will get 2 marks for this particular question. But if you have to solve an entire differential equation which is linear in nature using the techniques of solving a linear differential equation, then this question fetches 4 marks. Now, the trick with certain linear differential equation problems is to rearrange the equation to make it a linear equation. Sometimes the differential equation will not be dy by dx, but will be dx by dy. Only if you write it in terms of dx by dy will the differential equation become linear in x and not y. So these are things that can be slightly tricky sometimes, and students might falter at these particular points. So these are small tricks which can actually be the difference between 4 marks and 0 marks. Again, students who have not seen differential equations so far, this is not the time to look at differential equations. Differential equations is, in my opinion, one of the most difficult chapters standalone in the whole of the textbook. And this chapter should have been seen well in advance. This is the time to go through a lot of problems and solve them, but not try and understand the concepts. So this is a chapter that students who are aiming to get 70, 80, 90, 100 marks and who've done a lot of differential equation before should see. Students who are trying to pass in the examination, please don't invest any time in differential equation, because this chapter is not going to give enough returns on the investment of time that you're going to put in this chapter at this particular juncture. So with that, we close calculus. Now, you've seen calculus is quite an important bit. If students forget calculus altogether, you're losing almost 50 marks of your paper. You had around 30 marks coming in the chapters that we discussed the other day, and another 10-12 marks easily from the chapters that we discussed today. So you have 42, 45, up to 50 marks coming from the 5 chapters of calculus. So I've told you a few tricks. Even if you are not good with integration, even if you're not good with complex differentiation, do not leave the whole of calculus. Limits, continuity and differentiability, and a few simple differentiation, few simple applications of differentiation, application of integration. These are questions that where you can score marks. So at least 15 to 20 marks out of the 45 to 50 that is asked can definitely be scored without great in-depth knowledge of calculus. So please do not forget calculus incomplete. So at least do a little bit of calculus. Make sure that you know the terms, you know some tricks for very simple problems such as finding the points of discontinuity of a function, finding the points where a function is not differentiable, finding the area under a curve up to a point. All these problems are where you can score a few marks at least. So definitely do not completely ignore calculus, because calculus fetches 40 to 50% of the paper, and you have to try and score at least 20 to 30% of the marks which are on offer from calculus. So we've seen the initial part, which was algebra and functions and relations. Then we looked at calculus, and now we move on to coordinate geometry. Now, coordinate geometry is not very extensive in 12th standard. In fact, vector algebra should not be called a coordinate geometry chapter because it's a standalone concept in itself, vector algebra. But vector algebra is a prerequisite to three-dimensional geometry, which will be the only chapter of of coordinate geometry that is there in 12th standard. A lot of coordinate geometry chapters have been covered in 11th standard already. So vector algebra is not a new thing to you. As I said before, you've seen a lot of vector algebra in physics. In fact, the first chapter of physics in your 11th standard is on vector algebra. So we are going to actually build on what we learned in vector algebra of physics. I am sure that a lot of teachers who teach vector algebra in 12th standard math do not start with the introduction, because students by then are well versed with vectors. So even though the chapter starts with introduction, basic concepts and few definitions of vectors, these are concepts that you already know and you don't have to invest a lot of time in it. A 1-mark question sometimes will test your knowledge on, do you know the terms such as like vectors or a null vector or equal vectors? Do you know these terms well? These are concepts that are tested in your 1-mark question, which will become an Achilles heel sometimes for students who want 100 mark, because suddenly you've forgotten one concept and a 1-mark question pops up which is from that concept, and you've no way of beating around the bush and scoring that mark. So if you want 100 marks, you have to make sure that you go through each and every concept and know each and every concept, because that is going to be the difference between 99 and 100. The difference between 99 and 100 might be 1 mark, but psychologically for students who are expecting 100, that's a massive difference. So make sure that if you want 100 marks, you go through each and every concept that is there in every nook and corner of the textbook. Then we look at operations on vectors, addition of vectors, multiplication of vector by a scalar, and then multiplication of vectors, the scalar product, the vector product. which is the dot product and the cross product. We stop with this. Even though your competitive exams have higher concepts such as triple products, those are not important in board examination because these concepts are not at all there in your NCERT textbooks. So, vector calculus, the most important concept is definitely going to be the dot product and the cross product. There are a lot of properties for these dot products and cross products. So these concepts have to be studied very well. There are a lot of conditions such as condition for two vectors to be perpendicular, condition for vectors to be parallel, finding angle between vectors. And all these can be done very well if you know cross product and dot product. And I am pretty sure that you've seen dot product and cross product even before your mathematics teacher introduced these concepts in your 12th standard. These concepts have come from physics. You know them very well. You just need to brush them up a little. And vectors is a chapter that no one should leave because vectors will definitely fetch 1 4-mark question, 1 2-mark question, and sometimes a 1-mark question. So you're getting like 6 to 7 marks from vectors and from a chapter which you've already seen from the beginning of your 11th standard days. It is a shame if you actually do not score marks from the questions in vectors because vector questions are really simple, a concept that you've seen over and over and over again. So you should be definitely able to solve that, right? So I hope that your study of vectors does not take a lot of time, but gives you a lot of marks. So this is what I call high return on investment, not differential equation, but vectors. If you invest a little bit of your energy, a little bit of a time on vectors, you're definitely going to get 6 to 7 marks. Whereas to get the 8 marks that are on offer from differential equation, you have to invest a lot of time. So this time, you have to be a little clever because the exams are just about to start and invest your time wisely. Vectors would be one of the chapters where you would invest a little bit of your time and gain all the marks that are on offer from vectors. So I've been speaking for quite some time now. It's been 20-25 minutes since I started speaking. I have yet another session where I'll discuss about three-dimensional geometry, which is the logical next step after vectors, because three-dimensional geometry deals with a lot of things that you learn in vectors and takes you one step further into space, where you study about lines in space and planes in space. Anyway, that is for the next session, because now it's time to answer questions. I see a lot of questions here. So Mohammed Faisal Dar has asked me a question as to what are the important topics from vector algebra. So Mohammed, I've just answered your question, haven't I? This question must have been posted even before I spoke about vector algebra. The most important topics in vector algebra are going to be the multiplication of vectors, scalar product, vector product. So these two topics you will be able to solve varieties of problems if you are actually able to get a good grasp of these two concepts. If you know vector product and scalar product, you can find angle between vectors, you can find the condition for parallelity, you can find the condition for perpendicularity. So all these concepts, and more importantly, these concepts are going to appear again in the chapter on three-dimensional geometry. So it's very important that you understand these concepts. Of course, addition of vectors is also a concept that will sometimes fetch 2 marks question. Yet another thing that you must remember is how do you find the vector between 2 points if their position vectors are given. If you're given OA and OB, how do you find vector AB? This is a very, very important concept because sometimes they'll give you 4 points A, B, C, D and their position vectors, which is in terms of the origin, and then they'll ask you to find out whether AB and CD are parallel or whether they are perpendicular. If you're not able to write what is AB, what is CD, for which you need to know the law of addition, the triangle law of addition of vectors, without which you cannot progress and compute the dot product or the cross product. So it's important that you also know this particular concept. So in general, I will say the 3 concepts which are important from vector algebra would be addition of vectors using parallelogram law or triangle law, and also the multiplication of vector by a vector, which is dot product and cross product. So these are the most important topics from vector algebra. Okay, now I have to get another question here. Yet another question which has come from my viewer is on differential equation. So this question is actually from a student who is prepared for competitive examinations, because it is very evident. The question which is asked is, are questions where conversion from a non-linear to a linear kind of differential equation an important concept for CBSE board examination? I would say that no. Please do not concentrate on these topics because these are concepts which are important in your competitive examinations. Get out of the competitive exam mode for 1 month, get into the board examination mode, and please concentrate only on those topics which are important for board examination. In the chapter on vectors, I have told you that triple products are not important. Similarly, in the chapter on differential equations, converting a non-homogeneous differential equation to a homogeneous differential equation is not that important a concept. Sometimes CBSE board examination tend to ask this question, but definitely converting a non-linear differential equation to a linear differential equation is not at all a concept that is important in the chapter on differential equations. So there is no need to solve this particular kind of problem at all. The next question is Santosh K.S. Iyengar asks me how to draw graphs of given lines. Now Santosh, you've been drawing lines from a long time, haven't you? You've been drawing lines since about 9th standard, so you should know how to draw lines at least now, because it is the time to draw curves and not lines. You have to draw parabolas, you have to draw ellipses, you have to draw circles. So if you don't know to draw straight lines, you are in a little bit of difficult condition. So please do not be in a position where you do not know how to draw straight lines. This is something you've learned from 9th standard. You've been doing it for a long time. You've also been solving simultaneous linear equations using straight lines. So please make sure that you know how to plot graphs, because if you don't know how to plot graphs, you'll definitely not be able to solve integration problem, the application of integration problem. I'll take one last question because I am running out of time. So this is a very interesting question from Madhu Kiran, which says, can I get some tips for preparation? It's a very interesting question, a very generic question, but a very relevant question. Now, I'm going to divide the tips for preparation into two broad categories. One is preparation from the academic point of view, which is preparing the concepts that are there in the textbook. So this is the time to solve sample papers. So from the academic point of view, preparation now means solving problems and not learning new concepts. It's not the time to start learning new concepts. It is the time to solve past papers. It is a time to solve newer and newer kinds of problems, wide varieties of problems, and to gain expertise in the problems which are frequently asked in the examination. And to understand what questions are frequently asked in the examination, it is important that you go through past papers, at least 10 years of papers, at least since the time your syllabus has been revised and since the time this kind of question paper has been coming. You have to make sure that you go through all these question papers and solve all the problems that are there in these past papers. It is really time to solve past papers and also to solve timed papers. What do I mean by timed papers? You have 3 hours in the examination. You know all the concepts, but you don't know your pace. I am sure all of you have written a lot of preparatory exams, pre-board examinations, but still it is a wise practice to continue writing timed examination so that you know that you can solve so much in 3 hours. If you are actually taking more than 3 hours, then it is time to rethink your strategy as to which question has to be attempted before which question so that you can maximize the score that you get in the stipulated time. Now, I have told you that there are two kinds of preparation. The other kind of preparation is the psychological preparation, because exam season is the season of stress. Everybody from your teachers to your parents to your peers are going to put a lot of pressure on you. This is the time when you have to maintain your calm and composed nature and make sure that you do not buckle under any stress. For that, you should make sure that you get enough rest. Sleeping is very important. Please do not study for 20 hours a day. Please do not do that. Please study for about 10-12 hours max and then do a little bit of relaxation. Sleep well. Sleep for at least 6 to 8 hours because that's mandatory. On the day of the examination, the worst thing that can happen is you're not able to recollect concepts that you are very clear with because of lack of rest. Please don't be in this particular situation where you do not know concept, you're not able to recollect concepts because you've not taken enough rest. Also, eat healthy food now. Avoid junk for some time. Eat healthy food because it's very important that you keep yourself fit. Do not get into this position where you are ill on the day of the examination. So two kinds of preparations, Madhu Kiran and all of you: academic preparation, psychological preparation. And I hope that you are very strong in both these areas and you go to the examination fully prepared with the concept as well as mentally and physically. With this, you can solve your exam in a very nice way, pass the examination with flying colors, and that is going to make everybody around you very happy, including yourself. We have one more session in math coming up next week, where we will wrap up this particular series of Facebook Live sessions, which is called BYJU'S Revise, which is aimed at giving you insight to prepare better for the upcoming board examination. I hope you had fun. Write down all your questions to us. We'll try and answer maximum questions. If you're not subscribed to the BYJU'S app, it's time to subscribe, and you will get a lot of material that will help your preparation for the examination. All the best. Good night. Have a nice weekend.